Hey everyone, this is a video that I think will be kind of hard to make because I don't like necessarily being contrarian, but the videos that I feel compelled to make are about being contrarian, it seems. People have wanted to know what my thoughts were on Final Fantasy VII for a while, and I have delayed making any kind of video actually talking about my thoughts on Final Fantasy VII. The reason for that being is because I know many people love Final Fantasy VII, and I think that people can sense that I feel conflicted about Final Fantasy VII and had comments at me that haven't been very kind or that seem like a precursor to what would happen if I actually did share my thoughts. Saying anything negative, I think, can also turn things black and white, where people might think, oh, Miranda hates Final Fantasy VII, and that's not true. I have really enjoyed playing all of the games. I've enjoyed the original, I've enjoyed Crisis Core, and so far I'm really liking to play Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm enjoying it, and I am especially enjoying the remake. I think that all of their character moments are so well done. However, here I will lay out the conflict that I have been puzzling through. I'm sure that these things have been said before, but I purposefully shield myself from watching Final Fantasy VII content, and I don't watch any material. This is coming straight from my own brain. Anyway, so part of my conflict, I have played the original, and the first act, if you can call it that, was the most exciting part. My favorite part has been the Don Corneo moments where we're dressing up as Cloud and we're seeing the CD wall market and we're spending our time in Midgar. The thing is, when, after the first act ended and the world opened up, and I know this experience has been felt by others, I thought, what? There is this whole other game we have to go through? And then from that point, jumping from place to place felt a bit like a slog. And there was a part of me that had resistance that kind of wanted to stay in Midgar. Now, I'll explain more. I'm going to be using the Save the Cat hero's journey for this because that's what I've been thinking about and I've read most recently. So in the Save the Cat, we start with our status quo world, and the status quo world in Final Fantasy VII, in my mind, was of Cloud as a merc. So Cloud was a mercenary, he was on the job, he was with Avalanche, and in this status quo world, we get to meet Tifa, we get to meet the other members of Avalanche, and we get to go on a couple of missions. In this arc, the protagonist typically has the statement of the theme, and this happens about 5% of the way through the story, typically in the very beginning, maybe the second or third scene. The main character typically has someone else vocalize what they need to learn, and the main character just says, no, I will not learn that thing. And this happens in the original, where Cloud says he doesn't care about the planet. People are trying to provoke him to care or to have convictions or feelings about things, and he just says, no, I do not care. The break into Act 2 is very clear when Cloud falls in to Aerith's world. And this is where Cloud is tested with Aerith, and he kind of learns some things about himself. He learns to open up through Aerith's sweetness and compassion. In Save the Cat, this is called the Upside Down world, and we can see what's upside down about it just by the way Aerith dresses and by the flowers and just by her incredibly sweet demeanor. It's clear that Aerith is what is called the B-plot character, or the character whose main job is to help create the catalyst for Cloud to change. So throughout this moment, we have the Act 2 beat, which is called the Fun and Games, and this is supposed to be the proof of the concept. And in this, Cloud is actually having fun and games. I think that the most notable part is with Don Corneo, and it's kind of short, these moments with Aerith, but it's still definitely in line with story beats of an arc. And we can see that Cloud is having little moments. I mean, since I've played the remake most recently, Cloud is, he has a little smile, at some moments and maybe is starting to question his beliefs. We know that we have reached the midpoint of a story when there is a false victory, when we have an exciting moment happen, and when something happens that is a point of no return. And this point of no return seems to happen when they confront Don Corneo and he pulls the lever. So in the midpoint, things go up if you're winning. And then they hit a peak. So it seems like we're winning. Now we've hit a peak. And then they go down. And this is when the bad guys close in. This is when things seem to be getting bad. We typically see the turning point. This is when we go into the third act, when the protagonist sees, oh, things have gotten so bad. I now truly see what I need to do to change my life. And this is when their goal changes from their Act 2 goal, which is typically doing things the wrong way, into their Act 3 goal of, okay, now I know who the enemy is. I'm going to go after him. In this case, Cloud knows that the enemy is the Shinra baddies themselves, so they are going after Shinra. So Shinra is the big baddie. They're going after Shinra and Shinra headquarters. This is the assembling the troops. This is the Act 3. So we're like fully in Act 3 now of this story. And, you know, at the end of this full Act 3, we learn that Shinra is not the real big baddies. It is actually Sephiroth who is the real big baddie. And we're going to stop there, open up the world, and have a whole other arc now. I am very glad that they're splitting out Final Fantasy Remake into different parts because that is a great improvement. It does feel like the original game is a trilogy or something, is a 3-part or 2-part series. Because even though the first act is an entire arc, I can see how the first act can be a first act of a trilogy, for example. Because we spend the whole world in Midgar, when the world opens up, that's when we go into the upside down world. That is a moment. So we have the smaller arc, one whole arc, and then we break out into the bigger arc. So we're in Midgar, now we're in the world. So little piece to the big piece. And it was in this framing of the first act that maybe I feel like messed me up in my own understanding of what's going on. I just want to talk about personal preference things for a moment. There are people who went from Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII to Final Fantasy X, and they did not like Tidus as a protagonist, whereas I love Tidus as a protagonist. Someone who wears his heart on his sleeve, somebody who's incredibly giving and kind, and a bit playful and childlike, but deep down they're in a lot of pain. Cloud is an opposite type of protagonist who shows very little emotion and pretends like he doesn't care about anything. And as a protagonist, me watching Cloud, especially from the original point of view, this has since changed in the remake point of view, I could not care much about Cloud. And the entire story hinges on me caring about him. And part of what is frustrating is that no matter kind of what happens, even playing Crisis Core, or maybe even playing the remake, I still don't care about Cloud very much. I have a little bit of a, okay, so you're sad. So what? We learn why later, but it's a little bit too late to learn later. It is held off for 20 plus hours before we get to see any kind of why Cloud has no compassion. And in the Save the Cat method, Save the Cat, the reason it's even called Save the Cat is because when you have a protagonist who is not that likable, the main character can do something that can redeem them, such as saving a cat. Like in the Hunger Games, Katniss literally saves a cat in the first act of the story. And that even though she has a very, very cold exterior, she is therefore likable and redeemable. But my impression was that because I did not get a glimmer into his mind in anywhere in the first scenes, that I just didn't latch onto him. And so then by the time we get to see him be redeemed and we get to see into his mind, I'm like, a little bit, so what? And I know this is not other people's experience. So I'm just talking about my own experience. I'm also somebody who really enjoys a story that has a lot of companionship and small character moments and just characters being friends together. And if I'm comparing Final Fantasy X to Final Fantasy VII, I really got the strong feeling that the people in the party in Final Fantasy X were a surrogate family. They were extremely tight-knit. But if I observe Final Fantasy VII, these people are on a mission in Avalanche, and everyone is there for their own reasons. Even in the very end of the Final Fantasy original, Cloud asks everyone, as a leader now, transformed, to consider their own reasons for being there. As a personal preference, I want to see everyone unified in their reasons for being there. In Final Fantasy X, in the fight against Unalesca, all of the characters are united in their fight, and they each state the theme of Final Fantasy X, which is life is worth living, even if it's suffering. It is in that moment when all of the characters say the theme is when we break into Act 3. When they decide to defeat Unalesca and to go after Sin for real, they are all unified in their new mission. We also have a unification in their new mission in Final Fantasy VII, but it doesn't strike me as that strong. And maybe at that point, I was already a little checked out. I do think that Final Fantasy X has a very clean hero's journey. And in Final Fantasy VII, it is not. It is not quite clear. It is not really easy to map out the beats. Asking me to just study the world more and understand the complexities of the story more is just, it's just not how my brain works. It's just not where my brain goes. Look, and I also just don't really care about liking or disliking something, but it is hard to play a game where there's a lot of eyes and people like want me to fall in love with it, and I'm just not falling in love, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I want to fall in love with it. That is my goal, is to fall in love with the game, but it's not happening, and kind of like these are the reasons why, and it's not to take away from the game or anything like that, or to take away from my experience actually even enjoying the game. The remake, because they are only focused on that first part, I think is going to make it an extremely enjoyable game, and I think by the end I'll see like, wow, big thumbs up, I really loved it. So far, that's how I'm feeling, is I'm just having fun. And I do hope that you will join me on Wednesdays and Fridays as we continue this journey. But thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.